Happy Easter. You can say Happy Easter back. The Easter story is found in all four of the Gospels. A lot of details. I was going to read you the whole Easter story. How long do you think that would take? A long time. 5 minutes? Doesn't seem like very long, but when you're sitting, listening, might seem long. So how about just the most important part? There was a great earthquake. Do you think that's the most important part? Did you even know there was a great earthquake? Let me fill in a little bit around that. Matthew chapter 28, verses 1 to 10. After the Sabbath day, the first day of the week, began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to the tomb, and behold, there was a great earthquake. For the angel of the Lord had descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. His countenance was like lightning, and his clothing was white as snow. The guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. And the angel answered and said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where the Lord lay. And then go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and indeed he is going to Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you." So they went quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy. And they ran to bring word to his disciples. And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, "Rejoice." So they came and they held him by the feet and they worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Go, do not be afraid. Tell my disciples, my brethren, to go to Jerusalem, to Galilee, for there you will see me." Amen. Why would I say that the most important thing is the earthquake? Is that really the most important thing? But you can't really start the Easter story if you kind of go back in your imagination and think about what was happening. Jesus was in this tomb, and the Jews, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, that were very afraid of all the things that Jesus was doing. They said, "Look, you got to seal the tomb. You got to put a big stone in front of it, and then put a seal," or what we have now is caution tape. But they would put a rope with a seal on it, and they would nail the rope across the stone or to the stone, and would seal the tomb that way, and put a sign on it that says, "Fear of punishment if you go near this." So they sealed the tomb, and they put guards around the tomb, around the big stone over the tomb. So how could we start the Easter story in our minds if the stone is still there? Now, you think the Lord could have gotten out of the tomb with the stone being there? I think you could probably nod your heads and say yes, yeah. Because we know later on that the Lord appeared a couple different times to his disciples, and he walked straight through the walls of a house because he's the divine, and he could do that. He walked right through. So he could have walked through the stone, but could the disciples who first came, before it was all the way light, it was just beginning to be light, and that would be the end of the Sabbath, all day, what we call Sunday, in the way that the people would keep time there, that would last all night long. The new day didn't start at midnight like it does with us. It would go all night long, and then the beginning of light of the next day would be the beginning of the next day. So they had to wait all night long because it was a Sabbath day, and they weren't allowed to do anything on the Sabbath until they could come very early in the morning of Monday. But actually, it's not the Monday that we think of. It's actually Sunday because their Sabbath was on Saturday. So we kind of shift time, we shift days. Their Sabbath was Saturday, so it would be Sunday, like this morning. Had to wait early in the morning. And what would they have been able to do if they had come to the tomb and They couldn't have gotten in. They couldn't have seen anything. There was a great earthquake. Have you ever been in an earthquake? How many people have actually experienced an earthquake? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Have there been earthquakes here in Ontario? Yeah. So if you've been living in Ontario on a regular basis, you've probably experienced 2 or 3. I remember one time being up in the balcony of the church I was working in Kitchener, and all of a sudden, things began to shake. Can you see that shaking? Maybe if you're further back, you can't see that shaking. But I just put a plant on there so that it would shake when I did this. But if this was happening to the walls and the flowers there and all of the flowers and the board that has numbers on it and the lights, and it got worse and worse, and I'm not going to shake this so it falls over. I've already done that. Not really. What happens when there's an earthquake? Stones crumble. Would you like a little teeny stone to remind you of Easter? Don't eat it. All right? Oh, that's what happens. It crumbles and falls. I don't know about, okay. Tiny stone. Tiny stone. You've already got a tiny apple. That's good. I'm not going to pass out all these tiny stones. I want, if you would like, to take a tiny stone. The tiniest stone you can get. I don't want you to take my big stones, okay? Tiny stone. I'm going to leave these up here. Because I want you to think about what that earthquake is and why it's so important that rocks were crushed. Big rocks, little rocks. Rocks from France, rocks from Georgian Bay, rocks. The rocks that were crushed were all the rocks from Jerusalem. There was a big earthquake, a great earthquake. But the one that we're talking about this morning is just the one that rolled the stone away. But there was another earthquake earlier when Jesus was crucified. So there are 2 earthquakes in the Easter story. And the one when Jesus was crucified, it said it shook things. It tore things. Rocks fell and crumbled. That's why I have this to represent that great earthquake, or 2 great earthquakes. Because really the most important thing about Easter is for you to experience an earthquake. If you don't experience the earthquake, which stands for a big change in the way you think, all the people at that point, all of the people in Jerusalem, they thought Jesus is going to be our God. Yes, sir. We're going to march along during Palm Sunday and wave our palm branches and pronounce him king. And then they were all let down because his kingdom wasn't of this world. And the earthquake stood for all those people not getting what they want and feeling crushed. But they actually didn't feel it. Who was feeling crushed? The disciples. They wanted the Lord to live, and what happened? He got crucified. The Roman soldiers saw when the Lord was crucified, they saw the earthquake that happened then, and they said, surely this was the Son of God. They were amazed. They fell as if dead men when they were at the guarding the tomb. This earthquake stands for a big change in the way people were thinking. A lot of people would love to keep that tomb closed. And we have to watch out that we ourselves don't do that in our hearts. Close off the Lord. Let him stay there. So the earthquake stands for the Lord coming to you and kind of shaking you, maybe gently, and I'm talking about in your mind, maybe a little violently now and then. You need to get really woken up, don't you? Sometimes you really need to be told by the Lord, hey, stop doing that. You need to change. You need to change. The earthquake took place because that's the beginning of the Easter story. Very early in the morning, before the women got there, the earth had been moved. The rock had been moved. The angel of the Lord had come and moved it. The Lord himself, with his power, did it. And that's what he does for all of us. Easter morning, we're here to celebrate the Lord's glorification, the risen Lord. He's not here. He's not dead in a tomb. He has risen. But he needs to rise in our own hearts, and he will cause an earthquake if we let it happen and then we actually identify and go, oh, the Lord's trying to tell me something. I need to change. I need to keep growing in the Lord, keep looking out for what he's trying to tell me, keep following his commandments and changing and changing. And that's why I have these little pieces of dirt up here, because you don't have to change really big. I'm going to put this down here. But if you want to take a little tiny crushed stone standing for Easter? How strange. Who's ever done that? Yeah, I want you to think about the earthquake. I want you to think about the crushed stone. I want you to think about the Lord changing you little by little. Little by little. Put it somewhere. Think about it. Put it on your dresser maybe. Don't put it beside the Easter egg. Somebody might eat it. Don't want that to happen. But put it somewhere and think about, how's the Lord asking me to change this morning? How can I really celebrate Easter this year? I'm going to celebrate with family, have a meal, visit with people, go to church. But after this day is over, the next day and the following day, maybe you can have a little crushed piece of stone representing the big change the Lord wants to make, little by little, day by day, one thing at a time. Not huge, big things all at once. That's the Lord's job, to handle everything all at once. But he asks us, just a little thing. Let's make a little change. Maybe you can think about those things the Lord's kind of been trying to tell you about, and you're not listening. The stone's still across the opening. But you're listening now. You're celebrating Easter. You're here to remember the Lord and what the Lord did for us on Easter morning. He rose again. He came to all the people who really wanted to see him, and he told them, peace. It'll be okay. Come follow me. He went to Galilee, and he showed them himself, and showed a lot of people himself. And he can show us himself. And we can make the changes that the little crushed pieces of rock stand for. The little changes, little bit by bit, to truly celebrate Easter and what the Lord did on that first day, early in the morning, a great earthquake to stand for the change the Lord wants all of us to make, to truly be his disciples and truly celebrate Easter. Happy Easter.